Welcome everyone to the Interneighborhood Cooperation Meeting for March 14th, 2024. We have 4 topics on our agenda today. We have an update on the Sidewalk program from the Implementation Stakeholder Committee. For that, we have Jill Locantore, Executive Director of Denver Streets Partnership, as well as Councilman Paul Kashmann, who has for a long time been an advocate and on council, sort of the primary advocate for sidewalk improvements, here to give us an update. Oops, sorry. I have done the wrong thing there. All right. Next, we have Project 529 here to help end bike theft. Brent Fahrberger and Rob Brunt from Project 529. We'll have a brief update on the East Colfax BRT, what's going on with the program as they're moving through their phases. They just had a big open house, and then specifically a safety study that's going on parallel streets that we can get involved in. And then the sort of biggest topic in terms of the amount of time we're giving it tonight is an introduction to the new executive director of the Department of Transportation and Infrastructure, Amy Ford. We'll start with Jill Locantore and Paul Kashmann. I think Jill's going to start with presentation. I've made you a co-host, Jill. And look forward to this update on a very important program.
Let me see if I can share my screen here. All right. So it may be hard to believe, but it's been about 1.5 years since Denver voters approved Ordinance 307, Denver Deserves Sidewalks. So before I dive into proposed changes to the ordinance that are now under consideration, I thought it'd be helpful to give you all an overview of what's in the ordinance in case you've forgotten some of the details since November of 2022. I think that's helpful context for the changes that are under discussion right now. So as a reminder, before Ordinance 307, the responsibility for building and repairing sidewalks was entirely on the adjacent private property owner. And that is the system that led to the inadequate sidewalk network we have today, where about 40% of our streets have missing or substandard sidewalks. So Initiative 307 transferred that responsibility from the private property owner and put it back on the city, just like the city is responsible for building and maintaining other basic infrastructure, our streets, our storm sewers, etc. And of course, in order to take on that responsibility, the city needs a funding source. And so the initiative established funding for the sidewalk initiative via an annual property fee charged to every single property owner in Denver. The ordinance called for the construction of a complete sidewalk network within 9 years of enactment of the ordinance. And just as a reminder, City Council last fall pushed back the enactment date to July of 2024 this year, to allow time for consideration of the potential changes that we're going to be discussing tonight. And then the ordinance also provides ongoing funding for sidewalk repairs. So the intention is not just to build the sidewalks, but make sure we maintain them in a good condition in perpetuity for future generations and make sure they don't fall back into disrepair. So the fee that is written into the ordinance that funds this sidewalk program is a property fee based on the linear footage of the property frontage and the type of street on which the property is located. So Blueprint Denver, which is the city's overarching land use and transportation plan, identifies a bunch of different street types, which you can see on the slide here. And each of those street types has a preferred sidewalk width. So a local street, the preferred sidewalk width is 6 feet. Downtown, where there's way more pedestrians, the preferred width is 12 feet. So by tying the fee directly to the linear frontage and the preferred width, basically the fee is directly related to the square feet of sidewalk that should be adjacent to that property according to our city plans. So for example, if you are a homeowner on a local residential street and your property has 50 feet of linear frontage, which is pretty average here in Denver, the fee would be about $108 a year. or if you think about it spread out over the year, about $9 per month. The ordinance also included discounts intended to relieve the burden on low-income households. That is structured as an automatic discount for any property located within Denver's Nest neighborhoods. You can see those that are currently qualified as Nest neighborhoods right now. These are neighborhoods that traditionally have been under-invested in, have generally more bad sidewalks than other parts of the city, and have been identified as at risk of gentrification and displacement. So this discount was intended to both correct for that historical wrong and help alleviate the burden on the low-income households in those neighborhoods. The sidewalk fees that are generated can only be used for sidewalks, building new sidewalks where they're missing, upgrading sidewalks that are too skinny, that don't meet ADA standards or the city's overall guidelines, keeping sidewalks in a good state of repair, and of course, the administrative costs to actually run the program. The fees cannot be used for sidewalks or other pedestrian facilities that are not in the public right-of-way. So if it's a private plaza or internal to private property, that's still the private property owner's responsibility. It can't be used also for a lot of the other things that make for a nice pedestrian environment, like landscaping, street furniture, pedestrian scale lighting. Those things are all very important, but this funding source is specifically for the basic need of the sidewalks. Importantly, on a day like today, it also can't be used for snow removal. That is still the responsibility of the adjacent property owner. The program is to be managed by the Department of Transportation and Infrastructure, just like they manage our street paving, our stormwater programs, similar programs, to include some accountability and transparency in the program. The ordinance requires DOTI to present a comprehensive plan for how they're going to implement the sidewalk program to the DOTI advisory board for their approval, and then has to go back to the advisory board on an annual basis to report out on how the program is going. The ordinance also directs DOTI to use all of the great existing plans that the city's been developing for many years now to guide the implementation of the program. So most notably, we have the Denver Moves Pedestrians Plan and the Denver Vision Zero Action Plan, which clearly identify top priorities for sidewalks, including our most dangerous streets on the high injury network, major transit corridors where you obviously have high levels of pedestrian activity, and streets connecting to other high priority pedestrian destinations like schools and parks and grocery stores. And we also know that many Denverites deeply love our flagstone sidewalks and the historic character that they contribute to our neighborhood. So the ordinance does direct DOTI to develop strategies for releveling and resetting that existing flagstone where it's possible to maintain that historic infrastructure. Which brings us to today. After the ordinance passed, DOTI in late summer last year established a stakeholder committee to guide the implementation of the ordinance, as well as consider potential changes that we might want to make. So the committee includes representatives from each of the city council districts. They were selected through an open application process, so anybody could throw their hat in the ring, and got, I think, over 100 people applying for that. So definitely a lot of interest. Includes representatives from the DOTI advisory board, proponents of the ordinance, including myself and Joel, as well as council members Kashmann and Flynn. And I see on our attendance list, we have a number of our committee members with us tonight, including Lucia and Bruce, who certainly can weigh in with their additional color commentary in the chat. But definitely want to express my gratitude to these committee members. It's a tremendous group of people who really brought a diverse group of perspectives to the table when discussing how to move forward with this program. At its core, a lot of our conversation was about what does it mean to be fair when you're talking about charging a property fee in order to fund basic infrastructure here in Denver. And there's a lot of different ways to think about what's fair that are equally valid. And I think the committee did a really good job of considering those different definitions and perspectives and coming up with recommendations that may not be 100% aligned with any one person's definition of fair, but I think does a good job of considering these different ways of thinking about it. So the agreed upon purpose of the committee is to provide guidance on potential refinements to the ordinance that are still honoring the will of the voters, what people approved in November of 2022. And we defined what we thought were some key principles of what people were voting on. We were voting to publicly fund sidewalks through a property fee, while being mindful about minimizing the burden on low-income households through that discount. And there's also a deferral option built into the ordinance. We want to ensure that we can actually build out a complete sidewalk network in a timely manner, that we're generating enough revenue to do that, as well as ensuring that we can continue to maintain those sidewalks in good condition in perpetuity. Some of the key considerations we were thinking about when contemplating changes to the ordinance. Number one, we wanted to address concerns that we were hearing from community members and from City Council. In particular, these two concerns, we heard a lot about fees on residential properties, and in particular, those properties that were paying substantially higher fees than the average. I gave you the example earlier on that a typical property would be paying about $107 per year, but there were some that were paying a lot more than that, and we were hearing some concerns about that, as well as the potential burden on low-income households and whether that nest discount was the best way to address that. Again, we also wanted to keep an eye on ensuring that DOTI could actually implement the program as envisioned. And so key aspects of that were maintaining revenue neutrality. So if we're making changes to how the fee is structured, we don't want to reduce revenues so much that DOTI doesn't have enough money to actually implement the program. And we also wanted to keep an eye on operationally, is this something that is feasible for DOTI to implement? You know, there's a lot of different ways we could decide to charge the fee. We could say we want to charge the fee based on the color of your house, but the city doesn't have that information, so that wouldn't be a feasible way of structuring the fee. And then, of course, we want to make sure we're in compliance with legal requirements related to Tabor. There's a lot of regulations on what a fee can and can't do. And so we're closely consulting with the city attorney's office, and continuing to work with them on our current set of recommendations. And there will likely be some additional refinements that the committee will be coming out with, based on those conversations with the city attorney's office. And throughout, we've been, again, paying close attention to community input. Community members can submit comments at any time to the committee via an email. It's just sidewalks@denvergov.org. And then we did put out a survey when we had some draft recommendations that we wanted community feedback on. It was available both in English and Spanish. And even though it was only out for 2 weeks, we worked really hard to work with the media to get the word out, and did successfully get over 2,000 responses to that survey, including responses from every single zip code in the city of Denver, some a little bit more than others, but you can see we got pretty comprehensive coverage from all corners of the city. Which brings us to the actual recommendations. So there are 3 main categories that the committee is putting forward recommendations. One is changes to the overall fee structure. So again, in the ordinance as written, the fee each property owner pays is based on the linear frontage of the property and the street type. The proposed change is specifically for residential property owners to assess a flat fee based on the number of residential units and the density of the property. So defining a low density property as exactly 1 housing unit on that parcel, medium density as 2 to 7 housing units per parcel, and high density as 8 or more units per parcel. So if you're a low density property, you would pay about $150. If it's medium density, you would pay about $70 per housing unit. So for example, if it's a 10-unit apartment building, it would be 10 times $70 or $700. And then high density would be about $23 per housing unit. So the rationality behind this was, again, we heard concerns about the variability of the fees that different residential properties would be paying, from $0 if that property doesn't actually have any frontage on the street, to some properties that were paying over $500. In many cases, that's a corner property. We had a lot of conversations about corner properties when this was on the ballot, and the fact that they're paying for 2 street frontages. Some of those resulted in very high fees. So this proposal eliminates that variability by charging property owners the average fee in those 3 categories of low, medium, and high density residential. And the reason the fee is lower, the higher the density, is because those properties are more compact and you need less sidewalk per housing unit in those neighborhoods that are more compact. And so basically we're acknowledging that in those higher density areas, it's more efficient to provide sidewalk. You need less sidewalk per housing unit. By calculating these flat fees this way as the average within each of those density buckets, we're achieving that goal of revenue neutrality. And we're still retaining, there is that mathematical relationship between how much sidewalk do we need in our neighborhoods around the city and what is the fee that we're charging to the property owners in order to build that sidewalks, which is an important consideration when we're trying to adhere to the Tabor legal requirements. The second major change is related to the fee discount. Again, in the original ordinance, it was just an automatic 20% discount for any property located in nest neighborhoods. The recommended change is to narrow the number of properties that are eligible for those automatic discounts to properties where there are income restricted housing units. So if at least 25% of the residential units on the property are restricted for lower income households, the city has a database of those properties that are deed restricted in that way and can offer them an automatic 20% discount on the fee. So we're rewarding property owners for providing those income restricted units and reducing the fee burden for those properties and their tenants as well. And then the second part of the recommendation is to provide income qualified discounts to property owners throughout the city that is basically modeled exactly on the discounts that are now available with Denver's expanded trash collection program. That did not exist when we were writing Ordinance 307, and so that was not an option that we had. But now that it is there as an existing city program, we figured, well, let's just piggyback off of that, allow people to fill out the exact same application and get a discount on the sidewalk fee in addition to the trash fee. So depending on your income as an individual, you may qualify up to 100% discount or basically a waiver of the fee for your property. So again, the rationale behind this, it was addressing the specific concerns we were hearing about the nest discount, that it was both simultaneously too indiscriminate by being available to any property owner in a nest neighborhood. Some of those property owners are actually wealthy and maybe don't really need that income discount or that discount on the fee, but also too narrow in that we know there are low-income households who live in non-nest neighborhoods who could benefit from some relief as well. So the 2-part recommendation addresses it by making the automatic discount a little bit more discriminate on who gets that, but opening up a discount via application process to people throughout the city. And it does so in a way that does require a little bit more effort on the part of the property owner. They do have to know that the discount is available and apply for it. But since we're piggybacking off of this existing city discount program, hopefully it minimizes the burden both for the property owner and the city. And then our final major recommendation is related to the timeline for building out the sidewalk network. As I said at the beginning, the existing ordinance says that the build out should occur within 9 years of the effective date of the ordinance. The proposed recommendation is to give the city a little bit more flexibility by saying within 9 years of the effective date of the ordinance, or as soon as thereafter as possible, as determined by the Department of Transportation, recognizing there's a lot of factors that go into how long it's going to take to build out the sidewalk network. And we don't want to set up the city for failure by asking them to do something quicker than ends up being realistically possible, but still acknowledging the urgency. The voters said we want this to happen fast, and adding some language to ensure that as we're doing the build out, we're prioritizing sidewalks that really present a severe safety hazard. So we're protecting the city from potential liability claims if people are tripping and falling over those dangerous sidewalks. We don't want them to be suing the city and putting us all in jeopardy. We want to make sure that we're addressing those first and foremost. And again, the rationale for this one is, as I was saying, there are many different factors that will determine exactly how much it costs to build out the sidewalk network, including how the program is financed and delivered, trade-offs that we want to consider related to maybe we deviate from the city's guidelines for sidewalk design in order to save on costs in some instances. And we're still figuring out all of those details that will determine what the overall cost is and therefore how quickly we can actually build out the network. So we wanted to allow the flexibility to establish what is a realistic timeline, and that allows time for community input on those trade-offs for keeping the costs low. But we want to protect the city from liability, and so directing them to focus on addressing safety hazards first. And then finally, we're endorsing a relatively minor change that was requested by the Department of Parks and Recreation to clarify that the fees generated by this program can be used for sidewalks in park that may be somewhat further away from the street than we normally consider as eligible for this program, but they do play an important part in the transportation network. In a lot of our parks, the sidewalk is set a little further back from the street because they have beautiful trees and landscaping and other things that actually make it really pleasant to walk there. And so, of course, we want to be funding those sidewalks as well. Just want to make it super clear that even if those might be outside what we typically consider the right of way, they're still an eligible use of sidewalk funds for this program. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and hand it over to Councilman Kashmann to share his reflections on the process, and then we can open it up to questions.
Thank you, Jill. Yeah, I think reflections is a appropriate term. Really appreciate your presentation, Jill, and I want to thank you and the 307 team for taking us all by the hand as we jumped out of an airplane, hoping to land in a place where of better pedestrian infrastructure. You know, I think while the initiative was thoroughly written and very complicated, in my viewpoint, what voters were voting for was, hey, I don't like the idea that I might have to replace my sidewalks at a big fee. Let's all chip in some money every year. And then when the sidewalks need repaired, either at my house or yours, they get paid for, and we end up filling in the gaps that exist, and all these annoying too narrow sidewalks get widened so, you know, a few friends can walk along a sidewalk together without anybody having to be in the street. I think the committee has done great work to date on ironing out some of what we viewed as inequities that I do not think any of the changes we've proposed to date threaten the intent of the voters in the least bit. You know, seeing some of the discussion going on in the chat, I would just say that, you know, my view always was that I didn't like the per foot of frontage version, because for me, again, it's not paying for my sidewalk. We're all paying so that wherever we walk in the city, we're safe and comfortable and have a pedestrian infrastructure we can be proud of. The one thing that I'm really going to be interested in as the committee moves forward is, what does it turn out to be as far as a time frame that again meets the voters' intent of let's do this as soon as possible, not just kind of limp along as we've been doing in past years, but to really recognize the importance of providing this connected system. I've always thought 9 years was too ambitious, but better to have a great target and come as close to it as we can. So I would also salute the work on, as Jill mentioned. I know at least a couple of committee members are on this Zoom this evening, and Bruce and Lucia and anyone else who happens to be on, thank you for your hard work. But I'm excited that we're finally moving in the right direction with commitment that will result in a lot better than we've had. So those are my thoughts.
Thank you very much. And that's a great presentation to bring us up to date on this chunk of the recommendations, which are the vital chunk to get to council so they can change the ordinance by July. And then you've talked about some, both Jill and Councilman Kashmann talked about some other topics the committee will be talking about that aren't changes to the ordinance, their advice on running the program next. We've only had a couple questions in the chat, but I think a very important one from Allison. Allison, do you want to ask your question?
Let me, yeah, so I was actually just adding to my question. So when like Colfax BRT and the Broadway bike lane, they scooped in an awful lot of stuff that wasn't, isn't a bikeway. When I thought bikeway on Broadway, I thought some curbs, some bollards, some green paint. And then it became, no, we also need to replace the traffic signal. And since we're replacing the traffic signal, we need to replace the storm sewers, and just became this huge thing. So I'm wondering, like, Bruce responded and said that a lot of those costs aren't going to be expected. Because when I think sidewalk, I think you level out the dirt and you pour cement on it. I mean, I don't know much about sidewalks. I just know how to walk. So like if there's a dirt path on someone or a dirt path on the park or something, do you have to worry about paying for the easement in front of it? Or are there other expenses that could potentially drag this down, so I should not get my hopes up?
So because this is structured as a fee and an enterprise fund, there's pretty strict state laws about how the fund can be used. And it is only for construction or repair of sidewalks and additional expenses that have to be incurred specifically for that purpose. So for example, if you do have to acquire public right-of-way to build the sidewalk, that is the only way you could do it. That then would be an allowable expense. Or if you're disturbing landscaping in the course of building the sidewalk and then you need to reinstate the landscaping, that's an expense that would only be incurred because you're building the sidewalk. But if it's adding on additional nice things to have, which we all want, we all
Right.
want to have beautiful trees and pedestrian scale lighting and benches to sit on. Those are good things, but they're not eligible expenses of the fund. So the law really restricts, it can only be used for building and repairing sidewalks.
Okay, awesome. And I know you said this, but it's targeted where there are no sidewalks originally, right? Where there are currently no sidewalks?
It's for all sidewalk problems in the city. So if there is no sidewalk, it'll pay for new sidewalk. If the sidewalk's too skinny.
But I mean, prioritizing the first.
The prioritization actually has less to do whether the sidewalk's missing, too skinny or broken, but more, what is the sidewalk serving? Is it on one of the high injury streets like Colfax and Federal?
Awesome.
Is it a major transit corridor? That's going to guide the prioritization more than is it missing? Is it too skinny?
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, we've got four top. Go ahead, Councilman.
Yeah, the one thing that I just wanted to add to the discussion, while it may or may not um, increase cost of the sidewalk uh, project, having had experience with putting in sidewalks where none exist, most of us landscape our properties up to the sidewalk, and very frequently we don't own all that land. A lot of it's city right of way. And so we take a position as a city to try to work reasonably with homeowners rather than just come in and tear up their property and say, deal with it later. So that negotiation and give and take could add time to the way things roll out. But I think Jill's interpretation of the cost is accurate.
Cool. All right, great. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that's one of the topics I hope the committee, before it ends its work, gives some guidance to as to when to acquire right of way and when that might be avoided. And Jill talked a little bit about flexing on our design standards in order to get more done with the revenue we have. So looking forward to that. Thank you for the update on this important topic. Interneighborhood cooperation did formally endorse 307 when it was on the ballot, and we're all interested in getting it done. We're going to turn now to our second topic for the night. This is Project 529, and we have Brent Fahrberger on. Brent, I've made you a co-host, so you should be able to share your screen.
Excellent. And my colleague, Rob Brunt, is also here to join me.
Hello, Rob. Will Rob be sharing his screen?
What's that?
Will Rob be sharing his screen?
No, I'm going to share my screen for Rob. So
Go for it.
there he is. Great. And well, great to be here. Up until 6 months ago, I was working for Councilman Paul Kashmann, who we just heard from. And I now am working for a company called Project 529. We're contracted to address bicycle theft in the city and county of Denver. We work directly with the Denver Police Department to not only get bicycles registered in Denver, but also recover bicycles that tend to go missing. And we all know how that happens around town, unfortunately. But this hopefully could change that dynamic and get more people on the road to ride bicycles. We find that the second reason why people stop riding bicycles, the first reason is bicycle safety. You want safe bike lanes to ride your bicycle in. But the second reason is people are scared their bicycles are going to get stolen. And we have a solution to that. And Rob will go into that in his presentation. He was a detective with Vancouver Police Department for 30 years. And under his guidance, and he led the program there, they have reduced bicycle theft in Vancouver, British Columbia by almost 70%. And that is by using our investigation tools, by conducting bicycle registration events, and really leaning into this program. And I'm hoping we could do the same here in Denver. It only costs $5,000 for the city to use this. It was actually cheaper than the previous database that allowed people to register their bicycles with the police department. And I want to point out that Councilman Kashmann was the one who brought this to the city along with Joel and Clark. And so I want to give him credit where credit is due. But not only was this police database incredibly antiquated, but when you tried to talk to a police officer to locate someone's bicycle in there, you couldn't find anybody who could access the database. In fact, police were saying the only way they could return your bicycle is if they have a picture of it or a record of your serial number, because if the police don't have proof, they cannot give you your property back because they have no way to prove ownership. So this is not only is this since this is a registration system, it proves ownership for you, and it's kind of like registering your car. And this is a free service with the city too. If you go to any Denver police station, you could get a shield, which you put on your bike. It's basically made of glue and ink. And I just wanted to make sure everybody knew that they should register their bikes by downloading the app, the Project 529 app, and then put a shield on their bike, and make sure you do that. And you never know when that bicycle is going to get stolen out of your garage. That happens a lot in Denver, and we want to make sure we can protect your property. And if the police have the right information, they will get your property back, and they will get to work on it. It's just difficult for them when they have no proof. You could expect they'll move on to other things. So thanks for giving me this time. I'm gonna now let Rob have the floor and give you a little PowerPoint on where your tax dollars are going, where your $5,000 a year is going, and show you that we're making very good use of your money.
Welcome, Rob.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me. Brent's going to be my IT guy today because my laptop just went down for battery, so I'm using my iPad. So if you don't mind, we're going to share the screen here, and Brent's going to throw up our presentation, I hope.
Absolutely. And
so while he's doing that, a little bit about myself. So as you can see here, I'm the picture on the right. That's I joined the Vancouver Police Department in 1991. A little thing about where I worked at the time for the most of my career. So the poorest zip code in Canada, in 1991, the highest concentration of heroin addicts in North America. And unfortunately, we were second only to property crime to Miami. So 25 years into my career, I was an avid cyclist. I was a bicycle cop. I've been out on the street the whole time. And I call them my work family. I worked on the street, so I'm connected with very, very, very connected with my community. And so I'd, run into my work family and I'd say, hey, Bob, come over here, Bob. And Bob would be riding a bicycle that I can't afford. And so I know, unfortunately for Bob's circumstances, the only way he could have got that bike is through criminal activity. So I'd be like, Bob, he'd be like, what's going on, Rob? I'd be like, where'd you get the bike? He's like, got it from Phil. I'd be like, well, you didn't get it from Phil because Phil's been in jail for 6 months. Where'd you get it? I found it. Well, so then I would seize that bicycle. I'd flip it over. And so I'd try to run the serial number on that bicycle. I'll talk about that in a little bit more. Again, we're going to touch on serial numbers, but I'd run it on the Canadian Police Information Computer, CPIC, which is basically the same as the American system, NCIC. I'd run 16 digits, but if I typed in an O and it was a 0, 1 and it's an L, I'm getting nothing back. So fast forward 25 years, I get to go into the police department property room. And so in the back of the room, they've got this machine, goes up 2.5 stories. It holds 400, almost 500 bicycles on it. It's full. It's packed. There's not an actual hook on it that doesn't have a bicycle on it, but on the ground, they've got another 300. So I talked to the custodian for the property office, and I'm like, man, whose job is it to get these bikes back? Because, you've got a lot of work to do. And he kind of looks at me sideways and he goes, what are you talking about? We hold these bikes for 90 days and then we throw them into auction. I'm like, but every one of those bicycles, I always say it this way, there's a bum, there's somebody that's associated to that bicycle. And I had to write the report to get that bicycle in here. It still took me 1.5 hours to 2 hours to seize that bicycle, bring it in here. He's like, not my circus, not my monkey. And so I was super frustrated. First, as a police officer, we're basically carrying the ball. We were seizing almost 4,000 bikes a year. We seize those bikes, they go off to auction, and that's not great police work. And then as a cyclist, I'm like, man, that if I was a cyclist and knew this, I'd be super upset. So of course I go off and I complain to the chief, and the chief's like, well, what do you think we should do about it, Rob? And I'm like, you've got to have some sort of registration system. A bicycle is the only form of transportation that doesn't have a VIN on it. Like, we will hunt down, if your bicycle is $500, we'll hunt down that Honda Civic. But if you have a $500 bicycle, we might look for it. We might not look for it. So chief goes, yeah, that sounds like a good plan. He's like, you know what, Rob, what are you doing? I'm like, what do you mean? I'm a pro guy. He's like, yeah, now you're a bike detective. So I'm like, put my foot in my mouth. But anyway, I start looking across Canada. I figure there's somebody working on this. I don't have to reinvent the wheel. I look at Edmonton, Calgary, Montreal, Toronto. They've got the best system they have out there is a Rolodex, basically. So I'm like, not a big deal. I'll start looking into the United States. I can't, and the same thing. I look at Boston. I talk to guys in New York and that. long story short, I had talked to some people in San Francisco, and they ran into this fellow. The slide before has got a picture of him. His name's Jay Allard. So they said, ran into this Microsoft guy. He's invented this. He's designed a software called Project 529, and it's an app and a web-based bicycle registration system. So I'm like, download the app. I'm like, holy smokes, this is amazing. So it's not just a bike tool, it's a cycling tool. A cyclist can register their bike. A bike store can register bicycles. The police can search the system. The bike store can search the system, and the cycling community can search the system. So as a street cop, I know one thing for sure: policing is not great policing without the community. It takes a village to attack problems, and whether it's policing or something else. But I'm like, this is fantastic. They're like, I'm like, who's the guy? Jay Allard. I Google him. I'm like, he's not just a Microsoft guy. He's the inventor of Xbox. The only person above him is Bill Gates. And so can we give him your phone number, your address? I'm like, you can give him my phone number, address, blood type, etc. I want to work with this guy. Drive down to Seattle, meet Jay, bring him back to Vancouver. And so this is what we've learned. We've been at this 10 years. We are probably, maybe not, we're subject matter experts in this, but we're probably the best at this in the world. So brought him to Vancouver. We thought we would register 10,000 bikes in 3 years. We registered 10,000 bikes in 5 months. Our bike theft went down in 1 year, went down 30%. So for property crime, for any police department in Canada, the United States, double digits dropping in 1 year. And, I retired with 30 years on, haven't seen that before. Just doesn't happen. So, but one of the things when we looked at the system was like, wow, we did 30% in 1 year. How many more people did we arrest? How many more people, how longer were they in custody? So the system was, we didn't arrest any more people. They did not stay in custody longer. All it was this Project 529 registration, and we put a shield on a bike. So I'm just going to go into, if Brent wants to jump ahead, I'm just going to explain to you how we register a bicycle, because I think that really brings to light how the system works. Sorry, Brent, made you jump ahead. So
No, you're
everybody,
good.
so the big thing with Project 529 is they're not about being millionaires or anything like that. They believe that bike theft is a problem, and they think they can we have the solution. So the app is free. There's no advertising on it. Nobody's trying to get rich off this. Jay believes, and the company believes, there should be no barrier to you registering your bicycle, because at the end of the day, the value of the bicycle is not indicative to the value of the owner. So if you have, like myself growing up, I had a $300 bicycle. That's how I got to school, and that's how I got to work. If that bicycle got stolen, that would impact me massively. I'm trying to get bus fare, et cetera, et cetera. But anyway, so download the app. This window here, you can register on behalf of Denver Police. I would simply hit the add a bicycle, and then the next screen would be, so the next window is going to be the add a bicycle. So your name and your email address. So the big thing with this too, and I didn't think it was that important because I'm jaded, because I'm a police officer. You're not giving any personal information here. First name and email address. That's all the system needs to run. So the next window is going to be make, model of your bicycle. So they're drop down menus. So you start to type in Trek. Your model's Madone. It's a mountain bike. It's an electric bike. And then your colors, blue is your main color, yellow is the accent color. So next window is, this is once again, so this is a really, really good serial number. So there's no industry standard for serial numbers. And like I said, it's the only form of transportation that doesn't have a VIN. So we do our best, but you can imagine running that serial number on a police system. Like I said, if you type in a 0 and it's an O, 1 and it's an L, the system's all or nothing. It won't kick it back. It won't tell you were close or anything. It's just like winning the lottery. If you don't have all the numbers, you don't win the lottery. So we do our best. We take a picture of it. We enter that information. And the next window, you'll see this is the secret sauce for the program. It's called the Project 529 Shield. And so that shield is made of glue and ink. So it's a really unique formula designed by 3M for us. And so what it does is it adheres to the clear coat of the bicycle. And so it has its own 7 characters on it. So this window here, you can see the 7 characters, no numbers, no vowels. So the police, we're really used to running those 7 digits because it's just like a license plate. And so I can run it from my radio, I can search it through the police app, et cetera, et cetera. And so what it does too is it's like an ADT symbol for your bicycle. So when I said that the bike theft is down 30% in 1 year, and as Brent said, we're pushing the needle to 70% in Vancouver. It's not the arrest. This is like the ADT symbol. And so what it does is lets the crooks know the bike's registered. So leave it alone. Like we will be able to check that bike and see that you're not the owner. A couple more pictures here left. So I'm back. Thanks, Brent. So a couple things about that shield. So the new shield is got a QR code on it. So the police, the bike stores, the cycling community, they can scan that QR code and it will search the database for them immediately. And then as you see in this picture here, if you can think of, that's the down tube of your bicycle. So if you can think of sitting on your bicycle with your hands on the bars, and that's the tube that runs in between your legs. And so we stick it there so the crooks can see it, the bike stores can see it, and the police can see it. For a policeman like me that knows my bicycles, I can literally get on the app in my patrol car and I can run that bicycle from my patrol car, which is fantastic. Because now when I get out of the car, and Brent helped me with the lingo for this. If you're not allowed to stop people for, I mean, same in Canada, we're not allowed to just randomly stop people. That's not what happens in a democracy.
Stop. Yeah. Pretextual
Right.
stop.
So,
Yep.
so there's no pretextual stop. So because I've run that bicycle, the app is intelligent. Again, it geodashes where I am in the patrol car. So I'm not on a fishing expedition because we don't want to live. Brent and I talk about this all the time. We don't want to live in a place that the police just can randomly stop you. So now what it does, it allows me to use that tool and it'll go, hey, Rob, there's 10 of those stolen in your neighborhood. There's 20 of them stolen in your city. There's 50 in the state. And so now when I get out of the car, I'm doing an investigation. I can see that red, Trek Madonna stolen with the blue handlebars, the white bottle cages. I've got some really good, I'm having an investigation with you. Hi, how are you? I'm Detective Brunt. I notice you're riding this bike. There's 10 of them stolen in the community, and one of those is a perfect match on my system. Let's have a chit chat. Where did you get the bike, et cetera, et cetera. So it's not a fishing expedition. So, because we don't want that. So now 3 more pictures of your bike. You had that shield, take a picture of that, the side of the bike, the main profile of the bike. So what's unique on the bike. So if your bike had yellow handlebar tape, et cetera, we take a picture of that. And then the last picture is you with the bicycle. That's your basic registration. The last window on the app will tell you if you've done it right. Rob, you forgot to take a picture of yourself with the bike. You forgot the shield number. You forgot the serial number, et cetera. So we've done lots of things to build in, check systems for everybody to use the system. So got all that information on your app. Brent and I go into the Denver Brew Pub. I lock my bike up across the street. I've made a poor decision. I've used a cable lock to lock my bicycle. The thief is very happy about that. Clips my lock off, rides away. I come outside. I can go, man, my bike's stolen. Now I can use this window here. I can hit start alert. So what start alert does is I can do a bunch of things. I can go, yep, I just want a police report. We can print it out from the app. Yep, I just want an insurance report. I can print it out from the app. Yeah, you know what though? This is my special bike and I want it back. I can release my information to the public and it goes out like a yellow amber alert. So you might not have seen a black Trek Madone or that blue Norco in the picture before, but that's going to show up on your phone. It's going to say everybody on the app within 20 miles will get it. They'll say, hey, this bike was stolen. It was stolen from here. Here's a picture of it. So great for the police. Makes it easy. That bike is, when we seize that bicycle, it is my favorite job. I seize that bike and I'm driving it to your house. I look like a superstar that day when I hand that individual or he or she that bicycle back. So for the bicycle store, thief has stolen it. He wheels it in. The guy goes, well, that's a 6-foot guy on a lady's medium bicycle. They can use the system and see if it's stolen. And then the cycling community, Brent and I are just regular cyclists. We saw that Amber Alert in the morning. We're at the Denver Brew Pub. We see it locked up across the street. We can use a system like Crime Stoppers. You can take a picture of that, send the tip to the owner. The tip comes to the police as well. Or a case we had today in Vancouver, a person saw the bike on Facebook. They were going to buy it. They ran the bicycle to make sure it wasn't stolen, saw that it was stolen, reached out, sent a tip to the owner, said, hey, here's the URL, here's your bicycle information. And the police got involved with that as well. So for the police, again, like I said, super simple. They have a police only app. And so they can use it just to search the bicycle. So next window here is, you can see the details. So it's very similar to the way we would run a car in a patrol car. So I can type in, make, model, serial number, etc. But if I got the shield, boom, I got the shield. So I got the shield in this case. I hit search. Next window will show up what the search indicated. So you're going to see the picture of the owner of this bicycle, and I'm with the individual that stole the bike, and I'm like, what's the story here? Is that your bike? Yes, it is. When did you register it? I registered it last month. All that information is now in my hand, and I can interview the suspect and get all that information back. And now I find out, I seize that bicycle, and so I can hit the next window here. I can see all the pictures that this citizen has taken for me. I can reach out to her through the app, send her a text message, say, hey, my name's Detective Rob Brunt. I'm with Vancouver Police. I've seized what I believe is possibly your bike, and here's my phone number to contact me, or you can contact dispatch. So again, that bike is not going to the property office and filling up the property office. We're doing great work. We're no longer fumbling the ball at the 1 yard line. We're crossing over and getting a goal. And the citizens, I mean, like I said, before I was doing this job, I was in traffic, which was a super negative job. Every contact is negative. This is the complete opposite. Every contact I have with people is positive. We're returning bicycles and making a difference.
That's great, Robin. And the police, they love the props they get when they return someone's bicycle. And sometimes we get stories where we hear they'll find a bicycle, they'll see the shield on it and bring it right back to the owner's house and surprise them. And so what a better way to brighten someone's day than to give them back their stolen bicycle.
Brent, can you just pull up the graph of Vancouver for me? I just want to, I'm not going to go into this story because it's a long one, but
no problem. And yeah, we don't.
So the next slide that Brent's going to show you with the graph of Vancouver. So like I said, we started the program in October of 2015. Our bike theft went down 30% in that 1 year. And I don't have all the stats. I haven't updated this for the last 2 years, but if you look at that slide on the right, the blue is following the trajectory the bike theft was doing. Like I said, we're second only to New York. That blue trajectory is what we would have been on the process of had we not done anything. Last year alone, we probably would have hit 8,000 bikes stolen, but that yellow is where we were in 2021. We've continued that downstride, but that difference between the blue bar and the yellow bar is about $3.6 million in stolen bikes that didn't get stolen, and about 11,000 in police hours that were not used for bike theft. So yes, the program cost the city $5,000 to use, but the return on investment is for a police program or like a cycling program, it's fantastic. And I love, like Brent said, the city is doing great jobs all over North America, building, safe bike lanes where we have to do this. We have to get more people on cycling. We got to get them out of cars and using other forms of transportation. But, like Brent said, if we're not reducing bike theft, you're not going to get the maximum people riding that bike lane. So, City of Vancouver made this beautiful bike lane across the Granville Bridge. It was $25 million. Fantastic. But if we're not tackling bike theft, that bike lane is not going to get the maximum use out of it that we could.
So we've got
the yellow bar.
We've got about
the yellow
4
bar
minutes
is
left
reported.
here.
Yep. So if you have any questions.
Yeah. So now, just to be clear, Denver has signed up for this. It's not just an idea from Vancouver. It's here.
Yes.
Maybe the most important question is, how are people in Denver going to learn about this? What's the plan for getting the word out, and how can people on this call help?
Absolutely. And so what happened in Denver was this actually, our office was approached by, I don't know if you know Brad Evans, who was with Denver Cruiser Rides, and he brought this up to the councilman, and that the conversation started about 3 years ago. And it took about 2 years to get through the bureaucratic red tape to really get implemented. So that was a frustrating part. As I was the one tracking that policy in Councilman Cashman's office, as you can imagine. But in May of 2023, that's when the official launch took place. So we had a press conference at Campus Cycles. The chief was there, Bicycle Colorado, Denver Cruiser Rides, and other organizations. Councilman Kashmann, of course, who started this. And so we've been getting the word out that way. The other way is I'm working with Carla Madison Center right now to get a sign up at the center, because I've been in touch with their recreation coordinator there, and they are getting bikes stolen like crazy. And so we want to let people know not to lock their bicycles with cable locks. The crooks see that, and that's just an open invitation for them to steal your bike. Do not use a cable lock. Use a good U-lock. Spend some money on it. If you need recommendations, call us at Project 529. We're happy to help. Also, the police are promoting this program quite a bit. They did it a lot during Bike to Work Week. They also, in Police District 3, you can now register your bicycle through their community liaison, who hosts a event every week. But also, if you just register your bicycle online, you can, or download the app, register your bicycle online, and if you show proof of registration to the police at a police station, they will give you a shield for free. And we had purchased those shields through Councilman Cashman's office to make those available for the public. You can also purchase shields in bicycle shops, and they retail for $11. So, and I do want to point out, they're not just a sticker. They will adhere your clear coat, and you'll have to scrape that off with a knife, and you'll damage the clear coat and the paint on your bicycle. So the shield is a solid deterrent. The thieves, even if they try to scrape it off, the police are going to see that, and they're going to say, hey, there used to be a shield there.
So the process for most of us right now is, let people know about this, download the app, follow the steps to register, and then take your completed registration to the police department to finalize it, to get the shield to put on your bike.
Correct. And
Okay.
there will also be events happening during Bike to Work Week. So if you're riding your bike to work, you'll see the booth set up and the police registering folks.
Okay.
So
Thomas has a question here, who tried to use this. Thomas?
Sure. Hey, Thomas.
Okay, so that was basically my question. Is I've registered 3 bikes, only one was with me during Bike to Work Week, and so I wasn't able to get shields for the other 2.
Yep.
Is there a reason why we can't have these shields mailed to the person that's registered? Why we have to bring the bike in, even though the police
can
aren't
answer that.
actually taking
So
pictures?
I got 2 reasons. One is we don't want to cost the city money on stamps, and 2, the shields do cost money. And so we want to make sure that you have proof of ownership if you're going to get a shield. We're not just, the city is not going to issue shields without that proof, because we want to make sure it's your tax dollars at work, and we want to make sure they get on bicycles.
Okay, but I didn't provide any specific proof that I own the bike. I just rode the bike over, put in my information,
Great.
and they just
That was your
assumed
proof. Right. They helped you register, and they put the shield on your bike, and that's excellent that you did that. Great job, Thomas. Yeah.
So me having my rear end on the bike is evidence enough that this is my bike. I understand you don't want to mail it to me, because I'll just go down the street and put that sticker on a better bike than I have. Like, look, my bike was stolen.
Yeah, I'm sure there are many.
So so the registration doesn't prove ownership. So just like a license plate on your car doesn't mean that plate is this license to that car. You producing a driver's license to a police officer doesn't mean it's your driver's license. There's still due diligence behind us. We've also got software built into this, where if we have a thief that starts registering the bikes, he steals them, registers it before the owner does, we have a system of flagging that. And so what that does is help the police in the background keep track of that thief. And then when they do arrest him, we have a huge, instead of 1 bicycle, we can attach 20 bikes. So that's great for sentencing. So instead of a $1,000 bike, you've stole 20 of them. Now the judge is going to have to look at that and go, wow, that's 20 people you impacted. So Yeah, so just like most things, police have to do their due diligence.
So
we-
can I
we've kind
ride
of-
my bike to my local police station and say, can I please have a sticker? I've already registered with 529. Also, why is it called
Yes.
529?
Oh, good question. And let me just answer the first one. I'll let Rob answer the 529 one. I would call down to the police station also before you go. It's literally on the website that they'll give you the shield, but before you make the trip, why not just call really quick, make sure they got them and that they could handle it. So, and then I'll let Rob answer. Joel Noble also has the same question about why it's called
5 to 9.
Project 529. So I'm
Sure.
sure we're gonna cover this one.
So when Jay was developing Xbox, he designed it and they had it in the stores within 18 months. But those 18 months, they didn't have a day off. And so they had no work-life balance. And so Jay was like, this is crazy. We did a great job, but we need some work-life balance. So they created a bicycle team and they rode from 5 to 9 at night. And so when Jay got his bike stolen in Seattle, the 5 to 9 bike team was riding, and then they had parked them in a Microsoft secure parking lot. And so that's where the name came from.
Okay, well, thank you. We need to move to the other next topic, but this is a really important program. I'm so glad that Denver signed up for this. It has proven success. I think the key phase we're in now is letting people know. So people on this call are members of their neighborhood groups, they're members of advocacy groups, and I can see if there's some things that can be passed along through channels that everybody already has, whether it's PDFs to include in newsletters or material to put on Facebook and Nextdoor, that kind of thing could help people get this to take off.
Absolutely. And
That
if
would
you
be
need any
amazing.
of that stuff, feel free to get hold of Brent or I. That we have all sorts of free. I mean, this program tries to be as cheap as possible. We have collateral. We will share it with everybody. Just if you needed something for schools, any cycling events, we have it. We'll gladly give it to you free.
And it definitely takes a village. We could use all the community support we could get. We're also very busy. We just got the country of New Zealand on board, their federal government. We also got the whole province of British Columbia on board. That's Rob's life's work. And we're really excited, but we're super busy. And so any help we could get to promote this and make us as successful as Vancouver, that's our goal. And Rob promised me that when we first got Project 529, and I'm going to continue to hold him to it. And he's going to hold me to it now with the team. So thank you so much.
All right, let's make it happen. And you can please stay on and interact in chat if you'd like. Thank you both.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us.
We're now going to move to a short topic. We have an update from the East Colfax BRT project. I see Charles Alexander online. Charles, do you want to unmute and get on your camera? And he was going to be joined by someone else from the project team. If you're here, just raise your hand. And hello, Brian.
Yeah, thanks, Joel. I'm here to support Charlie and then answer any general questions about the BRT project if they come up.
Great. I know this is just a short topic, but let's see. It sounds like Charlie was having a hard time unmuting. Do you have that now? No, I don't know what's happening. Brian, do you want to give us the general update? Charlie's going to drop off and get back on. But I think we're just looking for a brief update on what's new with the project and then how to get involved in the parallel street safety study.
Yeah, thanks, Joel. And I will give you a brief update on the project. As you mentioned, we had a very successful public open house a couple of weeks ago. A number of people showed up and asked a lot of really good questions about the project and had really good feedback from all members of the neighborhood. We are, as the BRT project now, we are working towards final design and getting our contractor on board, working through the final details on the project. getting our federal funding in place and wrapping up all the loose ends. And we are hoping to be able to start construction third quarter of this year.
That's great. Looks like Charles is back, but I haven't seen him unmute yet. Do you have the information to share about the safety study?
I do not, and Charlie's the expert on that one, and all I would do is muddle the waters on it.
Okay, well, he has dropped and then rejoined, and I'm not seeing him unmute yet. So, Brian or Charlie, if you're in the chat, do you have the URL for the website where people can learn about the safety study?
I can look that up and make sure that it gets into the chat. It is and I will mention that the safety study is highly dependent on feedback from the neighborhoods, and we're looking for all of the information that we can get back from everybody that we can. So encourage you, if I can find that link and get it into the chat, encourage you to go out there and report your issues.
Okay, great.
Charlie's back in the waiting room.
Yeah, I see him online. We'll see if the third time is a charm here.
Hey, Joel, can you hear me?
Yes, we
Hey,
can.
there you are, Charlie.
Okay, yeah, I'm sorry. For whatever reason, my laptop is not allowing this to work. So I've signed in momentarily on my cell phone. I know you're, Joel, in a rush here to get on to your next and probably more important topic.
No, you're very important. Yeah, please tell us about the safety study.
Okay, so without having the presentation, I'll just verbally go through it here. So as I think many folks on the call know, and as Brian introduced, Colfax BRT is headed to construction this summer. And for reasons, pre-existing the BRT, but also acknowledging that the BRT is coming and traffic patterns are going to change, DOTI has initiated a safety study on streets parallel to Colfax Avenue, those being 13th, 14th, 16th, 17th, and 18th Avenues, really focused on identifying near-term safety-related improvements that we can make to these corridors. There currently is not funding identified yet for construction of these improvements, but the real goal of this effort is to identify what the needs are, what the costs are of meeting those needs, and work to program funding for those with the goal of construction alongside the BRT construction process, which is generally between this summer and 2027. We're analyzing a variety of sort of pre-construction traffic speed data as well as crash data in several different dimensions. Total crashes, crash rate, fatal and injury crashes, crashes involving people walking and biking, time of day, crash types, whether the crashes are happening at signalized intersections or unsignalized locations, whether they're occurring at intersections of two-way streets or one-way streets. Also looking at parking occupancy to understand the role of on-street parking and how that might be affecting crashes. And then also beginning to identify solutions. We're not to the point yet of being able to say what our recommendations are, but for the time being, what we've heard from DOTI is that they want us to acknowledge city standards, but also really think outside of the box to address the issues that are known to exist on these corridors. So we initiated our work in the third quarter of 2023. Our community engagement process that we're beginning over the past maybe 4 or 5 weeks will go through April with the aim of having recommendations ready in the second quarter of this year, so that we can hopefully have an idea of things that could possibly work their way into the city budgeting process. As a part of this, our outreach process, we're really trying to make it easy for people to engage, either through Colfax BRT channels. We had a public meeting 2 weeks ago, and this was a big topic at that meeting. We're also going to many of the RNOs in the area and other organizations, and asking them to provide us with feedback. That included Greater Park Hill Community on March 7th, obviously here at INC this evening. Currently, we have scheduled time at the meetings with South City Park Neighborhood Association, Capitol Hill United Neighborhoods, Mayfair Neighbors, and East Colfax Neighborhood Association. We're definitely interested in other community groups or organizations who would like us to come to them and seek this input. And through that, we are soliciting our input really to understand what residents and business owners rather, and other community members think the issues are. We're doing a variety of technical analyses, but we want to make sure that those really align with the concerns and perceptions of community members, so that when we come forward with recommendations, the community members really feel like we're solving the problems that we brought to them. So this being INC, we recognize that the purview of your group is really on citywide things. This project, Colfax BRT and Parallel Streets, really affects, a really broad swath of the city. So our ask of this group is really to help us channel feedback through our different mechanisms. The primary one, I believe someone dropped the link into the chat. I can't see the chat in front of me, but we do have a survey and a web mapping tool where those who are interested can give us feedback on concerns they have about the area. So our big ask for this group is to share that with friends, colleagues, neighbors through the different sort of more official or organizational channels that you have, so we can garner that feedback. Thus far, that's been working really well. We've gotten almost 650 comments on our web map with different suggestions and concerns. So with that link, there's also a QR code that I will attempt to pull up here again in a second. But yeah, that's the ask, is to share this information and get the word out so that we can get as much feedback as possible and hopefully come back with recommendations and solutions that community members feel are meaningfully responding to their requests. So that's all I had for presentation without any actual PowerPoint, but I'm happy to stick around for questions here before you get to your next topic.
Great. Well, this definitely does sound responsive to one of the bigger persistent questions that's come up in the corridor about given that people will be finding new routes for car traffic, what can we do to make those parallel numbered streets as safe as possible? And so I appreciate you getting ahead of it there. Do people have questions? If you propose a question in the chat, or since we only have a moment here, raise your hand. In your list of neighborhood that you're meeting with, I didn't hear one that I know a lot of people have had comments from, which was Congress Park. I assume you have plenty of context there.
Yeah, we met with Congress Park in December and on sort of a variety of topics, and introduced this to them, and are certainly open to going back to Congress Park or any other RNOs on this topic within the next couple of months to garner more feedback.
Okay, we appreciate the update. If you want to stay around to see if there's any questions that pop up in chat, that would be great. But this is, we have one from James. James?
So this may be out of scope for this presentation, but just in general, right? The Colfax BRT process is, the project planning process has been, a multi-year, it's been a long-awaited project, but conscious that construction hasn't even started yet, I'm just curious because there's other BRT projects between CDOT and DOTI that are being looked at. Are there going to be any preliminary lessons learned about just how the planning process in general was done? Ways that we could maybe find to speed up future BRT projects in the future that will be available to CDOT and DOTI officials who are going to be working on some of these other BRT projects?
I think I can
Brian.
answer
Yeah,
that.
please.
Yeah. And thanks. That's an excellent question, James. And I will let you know that we reached out to a lot of other places who have successfully implemented BRT and places that have had problems in our design and planning efforts. So we will certainly make our lessons available to the future projects as they're coming on board.
Okay, thank you.
Appreciate that.
If you wanted to stay around for the chat, John Ricky's asked a question here. I think that's been covered in previous meetings of the overall project, but I think we will leave that to the chat and move to our final speaker who's joined us, Amy Ford. Welcome, Executive Director Amy Ford. We're delighted to be able to meet with, pretty quickly every time there's a change in leadership at previously Public Works, now DOTI, to build those relationships between neighborhoods and networks and the leaders of the organizations, as well as what we do every meeting, putting people in touch with the project members that are leading the work that are is transforming our mobility environment. So thank you so much for joining us, Executive Director Ford.
Oh, thank you, Joel. It's really a pleasure to be here. And I would that I could have been here actually a little earlier. I think I'm on week 9 and would have loved to have touched base. You know, I've been connecting with a lot of group. I see you, James. Hi, and we'll hopefully hit Greater Transit, Denver Transit here soon too. But Bicycle Lobby, our Denver Sidewalks, and our streets partnerships and others. And so, you know, I'm really looking forward to sitting and chatting with you guys today. And hopefully you're all safe and sound as we've been working through a little bit of snow today. And so I don't have a presentation because of that. I didn't have time to put a couple things together, but I am really looking forward to talking to you about where we are, goals and others.
Great. Well, the time is yours. If you'd like to tell us a little bit about yourself and then the priorities for the department, and then we have plenty of time for Q&A. We have 45 minutes total.
Oh, fantastic. Well, let's spend it wisely. And, you know, it's really a pleasure to be with you all today. You know, I'm a longtime Denver resident. I've been in Denver now for almost 25 years. And, you know, a long time ago, as I sort of have lived through Denver in a variety of places, in Mayfair, Lowry, I now live in the Washington Park area. And, you know, obviously I participated in INC work and such over the years, and, you know, have a long history on corridors like East Colfax, if you will. I founded the Fox Partnership, where we think about sort of connectivity and community building and how we weave sort of the preservation of a community, especially when you have major investments like what you see coming in with Colfax BRT. And obviously I have a long history myself of transportation. And so, you know, I come from RTD, I come from the Colorado Department of Transportation. I worked federally doing work with in the world of advanced mobility and international, you know, international work globally on transportation planning and specifically oriented around surface transportation, but then also innovation and mobility. In fact, James and I worked together here just more recently at AECOM. But I can tell you this, how excited I am to be home, so to speak, but really representing DOTI which is a really incredible time for the organization. You know, when we sit and we think about transportation and infrastructure in particular in regards to sort of DOTI, I know that you all see us as an organization that really is about how we work to improve the quality of life for the people who live in our community. And, you know, whether that is how we connect, how people get around, how they get to their jobs, how they go to school, how they ensure that they are safe when they do that. And we'll talk a little bit about that, but also the services that we provide and how we think about, you know, the services some of you may have experienced, you know, for instance, not just what we were doing on our snow plowing and stuff today and keeping our roads clear, but then you may have had trash pickup today that we're making sure that they were keeping going even as the storm was coming in, and making sure that between wastewater services and stormwater services and our solid waste programs, that all of this fits together under the umbrella of DOTI, as you all well know. And, you know, as I sit and come in and as I sit and look at the organization, as I match with Mayor Johnston and where he is right now, I think that the priorities and the focus that I wanted to talk about today was how we continue to build this vibrant and affordable and safe community. And DOTI, frankly, underpins a lot of that. And to the good and to the bad, you know, I think that the relationships that we know that we have, that you all have with us, the Transportation Committee and others, often some of it will be built around the, hey, could you, or hey, could you focus on, or why haven't you done? But then also there's this relationship of where we go and how we envision and see a future together in where we can shape our community. And you all have been really active participants and advocates with us as we built, for instance, Never Moves Everyone, which really sets the cornerstone in my mind for how we shape and how we move this community forward and how we build from safety and our mobility and underpinned with sustainability, and how we achieve goals, for instance, of ensuring that we reduce single occupant vehicles in Denver, and how we think about ensuring that we continue to build more bike lanes and create equitable access for people when it comes to transportation modes in their choice, but then also ensuring that we maintain and build that infrastructure that we all so very much want. And so when we start thinking about that, I wanted to talk a little bit with you guys about goals and talk about a few. And frankly, you're going to be hearing some things that I'm sharing a little bit early because we haven't sort of released a lot of this publicly yet. But I wanted to talk with you about sort of where I see the programs and the team that I am joining, who is dedicated and focused of the 1,600 people who work there on how we do deliver. And when I sit and we think about priorities and where we are and where we've gone, I can tell you that these priorities are in my order. Safety, 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 safety is number one. And when I say that, I say that in a context of this. We all know that we're losing the battle, if you will, on how we keep people safe on our roads. We lost 83 lives last year. And, you know, of those 83 lives, actually, one of the things that I've asked as I come in and as we go, that I'd actually like an opportunity to know who those folks are, to be able to reach out to the family members who've been left behind and just reach out to them. You know, I recognize this isn't anything where I'm accepting responsibility or liability or all those pieces, but the reality is they're a person who were in our system who for a variety of reasons didn't make it. And understanding that sort of humanity of it is something that's really important to me. And so because of that, as we go through this, I came on board, and I think it's sort of matching sort of where the mayor is and how we think about aggressive, definable, measurable, but then bold goals that really reshape our community. And you saw him do this with, for instance, the House 1000 when he came in the first 6 months, and I recognized there were a lot of things that he could focus on, and he focused on that because the community and others were telling him that this was important. And a lot of people, when he did that, said, "You're crazy. Number one, 1,000 people in 6 months, it's just not going to happen. How are you going to be able to do this?" And they said, "Gosh, why would you ever talk about that publicly? Because in the moment you fail is the moment you'll be held up and say, 'Gosh, look what you didn't achieve.'" And you know, his response to that is, if you don't strike that moment and you don't try to embrace it, then you'll never know what you can achieve. And the same is to be said for safety. And so the goal that I've set for the team, and actually they've been working on this now really from the second week I got in, how can we reduce our fatalities by 50% in the next 2 years? And specifically in 24, how can we pick a corridor or two and reduce that corridor by 50% in 1 year? And I can tell you that that is, as I've told people this, and I have shared this, I have gotten great thumbs up, like what you did, Joel. And then other people who said, "You're crazy. What are you doing?" And I can tell you this, that if we do not think, and if we do not try, and if we do not strive, and if we do not put our resources and our energy and our creative thinking and the work with you, and this is where I want to talk with you all as community members, who what you see and how you engage, then what are we doing? What are we doing here? And I know I sound a little passionate about this, but I so strongly believe in where we're going with this. And so the team has been working hard on this already. And I can tell you what we know. It's speed and speed and speed. And we know what the problem is. We know where the problem is. And we have 35 high injury networks. I know that we just talked about how we look at some of those, even as we consider Colfax BRT and sort of our corridor and parallel networks as we go. But we know where it's happening. And so, in fact, here in another week or so, we are having sit-down discussions with CDOT on how we start thinking and innovating around how we approach this and how we approach this with speed. And so, well, we can talk about a lot of solutions, and I can tell you sort of what we're thinking about. We're thinking about how do we prioritize people first in the policies actually that we're carrying with DME. And there are a few things that I can look with the stroke of the pen. So I have, and in fact, I don't think do I have capacity to share screen? I do. So I'm going to sit and show you actually a couple of these as we go in, and I'll pull some up, how we start looking at different programs and policies and how we incorporate a safety first policy, a people first policy, which means when we think about the diagram of how we look at the people and the services that we are providing on our roadways, that is people first. And I'll pull those up as we get going. I thought I still had them on, but my computer restarted here in the course of these discussions while I was waiting. So I'll pull them back up as we're going. But when we're sitting and thinking about how we look at the policies, how we look at the procedures, frankly, and how we look at sort of programs and projects of what we do on this corridor. And so when we think about some of this, I think I can tell you this, that we are going to be examining things like how we implement across citywide, not just thinking even in these corridors, but new policies that are changing our signal light timing. So again, there is a pedestrian policy attached to where we are. how we are thinking about looking at different programs that maybe be out there. So for instance, we know we have problems with people dragging corridors. We know that a lot of our crashes happen at night. How can we think differently about, for instance, maybe we put in temporary speed bumps along certain corridors. Maybe eventually I do things like not stripe in, but actually groove in something called transverse rumble strips, which are designed, and you see them in rural roadways, that actually slow people down as you come into intersections. Maybe we think about how we handle some of these and what we do. And these are kinds of programs. How do we illuminate the corridors so that we can get outside of where we see where people aren't seen when they come into this corridor in these roadways? How do we think about different, again, policies that maybe look at different turning policies and others? And so as we go through all of this, I think that, and I'll show you a couple of these pieces that I'm talking about now. Because why? Because I've just signed them. I'm not yet public with all of them. We will be talking about them with press and others and all that, because I think it's also important to hold ourselves accountable. So you can see, for instance, in our safety first policies, how we assure that when we are thinking about safety being sort of at the primary part of how we think about how we design and engage and build these systems and these transportation systems. So this is a piece of our priorities that we are going to be engaging in. How we think about the people side of that, and I'll show you that policy that I just also signed. And you guys are familiar with these because it carries the energy that we pulled in through DME that you all helped us with, that you guys helped us think through as we were moving forward our programs. Specifically then on the people side of this, this is our people first priority. How we sort of make sure that people understand that when we are building our system and our road system, that we are ensuring that this diagram is always how we think about it. And things like this are long form, right? When we talk about how we cumulatively put together programs that address safety. But short form is our priority on how we reduce fatalities by 50%. And so I wanted to share that. And actually, I'd be happy to stop and sort of answer questions and sort of thoughts and observations as you guys are seeing this. And we are going to come and we're going to be talking to the public a little bit more and sharing that. It includes also things like automated speed cameras. As you know, again, speed is the thing. We know that the state just authorized us to be able to sort of move forward with automated speed cameras. And the priority of that is safety. And so how do we implement a program like that? How are their policies and approaches? Actually working with the Denver Bicycle Lobby and our Denver Bike Mayor right now, they were thinking about some of this and asked them to help us with a white paper where they put together some thoughts about how we address issues of equity, how we address issues of the program itself and where the money really goes. Because let's be honest, in some of this, people think it's a money grab, but really how we funnel that to ensure that our objectives of safety are continuing to be met. How do we put together a program, again, that treats everyone fairly, equitably, where we go in community and otherwise? And so these are some of the ideas and the things that we're working through right now. And I wanted to frankly share it with you. And I know what you were like, why are you talking about it right now? And I was like, yes, we're talking about it right now because it is going to be that important. But then I'd love to sit and chat about some of the other things that we're thinking about and that we're prioritizing. But let me maybe just stop there, if that's okay, Joel. And we can sit and chat a little bit. And I'm going to go scrolling through the messages as they're coming in, and see if there are any thoughts or questions as you got them. And then I can talk about some of the other
let's focus first on the safety because that's very important. You may not know that Interneighborhood Cooperation has a transportation platform, and it's a number of things we wanted. It's a little bit old, been meaning to get around to updating it. But in that INC called for Denver to commit itself at the highest levels to Vision Zero, and we're proud to be among that core set of advocacy groups calling for that. And there's been work done, but there hasn't been progress made. And so this is pretty exciting.
We've been steady making work and making, trying to make improvements. We realize, like you said, Joel, that we've gone like this. And a couple of notes as we go through that, we were at 83 this last year. We were at 83 the year before that. So we sort of held steady. But what we did not hold steady in were our vulnerable road users. And their numbers continue to increase. I've been asking for a variety of deep dives because as we get into this and we get into truly the fatality issue, tell me what our stats are. So I'll use examples of how do we solve for all of these problems and the challenges that we see. For instance, of the pedestrians who we had, who we lost this year, 32 was the number. And of that, nearly 40% were unhoused. So when we sit and we think about how do we solve for that challenge and how do we think about that particular use case, I'm asking us to unturn sort of every stone, if you will. How do we have a conversation about that? What are the solutions there? Is it on our roadways? Is it, I use an example and that's me not, but do I issue people high visibility vests so they can simply be seen when they're out and about? How do we address some of the mental health challenges they may be experiencing that are causing them to be put in vulnerable positions? So you can see that I want to make sure that we dig a little deeper, ask harder questions, and really think about where we might be able to go with this. But I see folks asking questions. I know that you
Please
have a
do.
process on how you sort of
Please.
force these in.
It looks like Stan has a good question about safety. We'll try to
Yeah.
pick out the safety ones first here.
Go for it.
Stan?
Hello, Amy. Glad to
Hi,
meet you, and very familiar with June. And I think she has talked to you about presenting at a mayor's bicycle advisor committee meeting in the coming months. So we look forward to that. But my really big issue, and the thing I'm grappling with so recently since I came back from Australia, New Zealand, where there is such a great understanding between vehicular drivers and pedestrians and cyclists. You talk about all the things that we could implement: signal timing, rumble strips, lowering speeds, but how do we address ongoing poor, bad behavior? And I'm planning on meeting with Pete Piccolo with Bicycle Colorado and Skylar McCullough with AAA. But any thoughts on that? Just poor, bad behavior in this area, and it just doesn't stop. What do you think?
It's a fair question, Stan, and it's not an easy one. And how we, I mean, I can rattle off a few things, and I will here, but I think that especially in Australia and New Zealand, and in fact, June and I had this conversation we were talking about. We know that in communities like that, one, there's sort of an integrated modality, if you will. So we do see some of that is coming along. But at the same time, we also know that they have a culture of compliance. And the reason they have culture of compliance is also because they are watched and seen. And so we were talking about this related to automated speed cameras, for instance, that, they have automation, they have sort of ticketing, they have a variety of things that address speed, they address bad behavior, it address things like turning improperly and a variety of things. And so there's that by the very nature of some of that, compliance comes with sort of the threat, if you will, of enforcement and fines and things like that. So that is a part of some of it. When I sit and think about a few things, I think a lot of it is sort of cultural and how we get into this. So for instance, we use the example of turning, and we have a lot of conversations right now about right turn red bands, and we know sort of when and where they were put in and such, and carrying maybe the energy even of the discussion that I was showing in the People First policy. A large part of me is starting to think about how do we look at municipal code and change it in a way that actually puts people first in code. So who has the right of way? A person, i.e. a person outside of a vehicle, whether walking or riding or rolling, they have right of way in how they are sort of engaged at intersections, at stop signs and others. And what does that mean? And how do you articulate that? More than a yield, but that thou shalt not turn, thou shalt not do this, if there is a person in there. But how do we do that? How do we write that? How do we create that? And then how do you carry that through on a public acceptance perspective? And those are difficult things, public information campaigns and others. So a combination of layer of law, compliance, social norming, education, and then frankly, creation of infrastructure that facilitates that cohabitation, if you will. And so those is not certainly comprehensive and not an easy answer to address, right, on how we do that. But those are some of the levels of thinking. And frankly, that's some of where I'm asking sort of how we think creatively about all of that together.
Well, during my discussions with Pete and Skylar, those topics may come up, and trying to get this across to the public is a
Mhm.
difficult and challenging situation. So
Yeah.
thank you for, thoughts. I'm sure we'll continue this discussion when we meet with you next month, but I
Yeah.
kind of wanted to really set the tone in a different mindset because, creating all the greatest, safest streets, if a person doesn't comply with that, or doesn't understand the culture and things like that,
Yeah. No, I appreciate
we
that.
got a challenge. So
Yeah,
thank you.
and we had the same conversation. I met with the mayor's pedestrian advisory committee this week, and so we had some of that same conversation. But John, Ricky, I see you asked a question about us degrading bike lanes during construction, and I don't know if you want to add on to that before I chat a little bit about it. But
I guess in general and in specific, you're certainly using all the right words, but we've heard all the right words before. So
Yep.
specifically, what are you going to be doing differently than previous DOTI leadership teams that is actually going to get the work done rather than just, looking at that pyramid and then promptly ignoring it?
Yep. No, that's a very fair question. And, one of the things that I ask you all to do is, and, I chatted with June and the bike advocates and others about this, is how you hold us accountable and hold me accountable, frankly, for exactly what we're talking about. So let me use the example of the bike lanes. So, and construction activities. And there's a very specific tool in that particular instance, and one that I don't know if we're being very active about. So every construction project has an established, what I'm going to call MHT, so method of handling traffic. And within that MHT, and so you may have that words, they set sort of designations about what they're supposed to be doing around trails, what they're supposed to be doing around bike lanes, what they're supposed to be doing about, let's say, bicycle or pedestrian access, even roadway access if they're reducing lanes and all of this kind of stuff. And those are approved. Those things are approved by our engineers and others during the project. And what you see on paper doesn't get always translated to what you then see on the road. And it's actually a wrong implementation, if you will, because as you can imagine, our engineers are not going to approve something that sets up structures within and inside the bike right of way, as an example, and without detours and that kind of thing. So how we do some of that and what we need to be doing in some of that regard, and this is actually something I was just talking to the team about and trying to think about where I get the staff resources to actually go in and to be able to do this, as an example, is this an enforcement piece on our side. So we have the ability to go in and enforce and to inspect what's happening on our construction projects. And actually, if you were to call them in or otherwise, and it's a fine structure actually for contractors. And in fact, I'm meeting with the Colorado Contractors Association and others, and we're talking about collaborative partnerships and success and where we need to be. And this is actually something, after I talk about pre-qualifications and some bidding things, one of the things that I want to be talking about, and actually the intentionality about how they're holding to sort of the expectations that we have. So that's like a small example on sort of your particular question about how we would try to do that. And I would appreciate it, actually, and I can certainly happily provide my email and all of that. It is just as simple as you think, amy.ford@denvergov.org. But how we hold ourselves accountable for some of those kinds of things. The other piece that I want to be able to think and structure about, John, is sort of an understanding. I think it's a little buried right now. And I think that DOTI sometimes has a reputation of not always communicating what we're doing, why we're doing something, why we're not doing something, and explaining sort of how we're responsive, for instance, to different needs and different expectations around the city and the questions that are getting asked. And I think there's a real opportunity there for us to be a lot bit better. And as we go into this, I use that example. So 311 calls that ask us to make an improvement, for instance, on a crosswalk in a particular area, and sort of what that means and what that looks like. I'm going to share with you an initiative that we've kicked off and that I've started with our team, that I'm talking with council members and others about some of this. And to be perfectly honest, it's how do we better daylight, in fact, even where we are and what we are doing and what we are investing in? And especially as we sit and we talk a little bit about budget cuts, which I'm happy to sit and chat about too, how we ensure that people understand what we're committing to and then holding us accountable for being able to deliver that. So I'll just use a small example. I think it's hard sometimes to get past the fact that we are a very large organization. There are a lot of people, and you can see that I'm sort of talking about community engagement and how we really truly meet the districts, for instance, and where you all or where you represent your neighborhoods and how we go through that. And I'll tell you, this is an example. You're seeing my working document that I'm sharing with the team. I've got another meeting tomorrow. We've had 3 meetings where we sit and we think about how we truly approach and engage with our neighborhoods and where our communities are and where our districts are and others. And so you can see sort of the nature of the people and you maybe encounter. So whether it's our community design team members, whether it's actual projects themselves, area engineers, for instance, are the ones who get the over 3,000 calls that come in on 311 asking for that said crosswalk or such and such. And the communication that they have are restricted, for instance, on a Salesforce item to less than 3 lines on how they communicate back with folks, which doesn't give you much insight other than if I have an engineer who says it didn't meet warrant, and meaning warrant, meaning the number of people who would result in us needing to put in a crosswalk or others. But how do we engage with our community business reps and others, even all the way to our utilities rep and others, and thinking about how we work and respond? And maybe there is not an engineering solution, but how we maybe collaborate across these groups and our community reps and others to think about how we address some of these challenges together. And so this is some of the work that I'm asking us to be thinking about, that we want to be coming back to you all, community members and that our council members and others, and then being able to even dashboard it, to be honest. So you can see my excellent dashboarding skills here, which I basically threw together and said, hey, I would love to be able to have this because I'd love to be able to come to INC and others and be able to say, here are the projects that are happening in your area. Here is what is on our planned 6-year list for you. Here's the programs that we have. Hey, for instance, this is when we're coming to you with your compost rollout, or as we start thinking about it citywide, and that's a conversation we can have a little bit later. What are the metrics? What's happening in your community? How do we address all of those 311 tickets that are coming through? So these are some of the things that I'm sitting and chatting with the team about, because back to your point, I think last comment is a long answer to a short question, which is, how do I know you're different? How do we hold you accountable? Because we tell you what, you see it, and then we can have that conversation. So back to the goal of the fatalities goal. One big part of the goal, let's say when the mayor was doing the House 1000, was about showing a public dashboard and being able to see that. And I think that that's a really important piece to this communication too. And then frankly, what I'd love to be able to do is continue to have this conversation with you guys. So perhaps, Joel, maybe what we could do is even sit every other month or something like that. We just come and have some of these conversations and we can talk about exactly that.
Great. And you've really established a reputation for yourself right off the start. I'm hearing from everybody that you're talking with everybody, and to a degree I've never seen before. Let me grab just a couple more safety related things. But first, I want to honor John's question. I think what he was trying to get at was DOTI proposes a high quality separated bike facility that's concrete, and by the time it gets implemented, it's, you know, some paint. That's the process.
Paint and bollards. Yeah,
right.
Exactly. Yep. Yeah, and I actually, thanks, John, for clarifying that. I see that in your note now, as you're going, when a bikeway went to diverters and others. And I think that that is going to be a part to a combination of money, availability, and design, and then communication. So take the West Colfax communication that just happened, which was not our finest moment. So West Colfax project, as you know, is a safety implementation project. It is a bond project, and it was running short of dollars. And what you all were not aware of probably is the DOTI team sat behind the scenes for months and months and months trying to figure out how to dig out the extra dollars so that they could get that project to whole. And so working, trying to think about it. And finally, it was like, we can't get there. We're going to the priority, which we think is safety. So therefore, landscaping goes away. Told you that. And the next day said, we're starting our project. And of course, the community, no surprise, went, what the hell? And it is about expectation setting, and to be honest. And so, John, going back to your point, so Clay Street Bikeway, I don't know, and I have to go look into that one. I'll just take a quick note on that. Was it a budget issue? Is it an expectation setting issue? Did we say that a bikeway was always going to be the lane, and did we then downgrade it because we didn't have the funds to do it? Did we decide that we wanted to move it to a quick implementation, and so therefore started with diverters because we can get that quicker, and then we're going to move it to a permanent solution later? For instance, that's some of what we're talking about with the 7th and Williams Bikeway, which also has created a bit of controversy and interesting pieces of it. But to be perfectly frank, it is about communication during that process. And so nothing pisses people off more, and use my language when I say that, when you just simply don't know and then something happens to you, and sort of lack of control, lack of engagement, and awareness. Now, we may make a decision on something, on a budget change or others, that you may not love, but how we communicate that, how we engage with you on that, and how we sort of get to a solution together, that I think is a big part to that. So not a perfect answer, John, to your question, because I'll look into that one as I'm curious now. But I'd love to know the reason why. But you coming along on the journey with us, I think, is an important part to that.
Let's grab a couple more safety ones. June has a question about the things you're talking about for safety. June?
Yeah, I also want to quickly highlight John said the reason it was downgraded was politics. Also, I really, really appreciate you, Director Ford. You've really engaged with us a lot on these issues over the past few months. And very quick updates for the folks who weren't reading the chat, that photo enforcement proposal that Amy mentioned. We've got some city council members interested that we're going to be presenting to. I've also temperature checked a few others, and it sounds like people are generally speaking in support, or very heavily in support. So I'm optimistic we'll get that done.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Well, I can tell you too that we have an interagency meeting with DPD and all of us tomorrow, where we are going to sit and start talking about the policies and the implementations. And frankly, some of the guiding document that you gave us is a guiding piece to that conversation. So more to come as we go on that.
Excellent. So we've heard you talk about temporary traffic calming and your Vision Zero setting goals, right?
Mm-hmm.
What's the actual timeline for those first temporary traffic calming measures? When are you going to make those goals public? I'm sorry, I'm adding on more to my question, Joel. When are you going to make those goals public? And finally, that document you signed about setting policy, is that, can we get that? Can we see the actual text of that and get the full document?
Yep.
That's three questions in one, but I figured you can handle it.
I don't know if I can attach documents in this, otherwise I'd send them to you. But so actually what I've asked the team to do, so I want to go talk to the mayor. So I'm just going to give you the straight group here. I'm sitting and talking to the mayor here next week about all of our DOTI goals and where we are. He's sat and heard me talk about the safety one. And so this is not a surprise, and I want to confirm and engage with him. And so, because he is a big part to this, and as he and I have sat and chatted with this about, he is very much in favor. We chatted about this, in fact, with Assistant Secretary of the US DOT, who was in town just last week. And so want to confirm and finalize all of those conversations. And then I am actually asking the team that we were going to be doing some pretty significant media and press and community engagement to talk about our priorities and our goals. If I can get it before I go on my son's spring break trip here at the last week of March. If not, it's going to be literally about the week or so after, so early April. And so we will be talking about those goals. And when I would do that, I am going to be sharing sort of those policies and some of those pieces that we are starting to implement that. So you're getting to hear all my plans, you guys. Nothing's secret. You'll get to see it all as it comes out. In regards to sort of the implementation of the Vision Zero, but really what I'm going to call our safety revolution. And that's actually what the team wanted to call it, because that's how they're viewing it and trying to rethink what we're doing on speed. They're putting together, in fact, we had a long meeting today about this, my full Gantt chart on strategies and implementations. We've got some corridors that we're thinking about for our year one goal, which is to reduce 50% in one quarter, at least in 24. And so I'd like to come back to you all and share some of that goals and thoughts. My thought is that you're going to start seeing some of these implementations and changes coming in here. Probably there are some that we can do quickly. So as we start changing things like light timing on pedestrian preference, for instance, on light timing, the LAP strategies, some of the others starting this summer. And then you're going to see some of them build out over into summer, into the fall. So it's going to take us a little bit on some of the ones that are more infrastructure heavy. So for instance, daylighting with bright light kinds of things, as we're in certain areas such. So it'll take a little bit longer, but how we use our own internal teams to spin some of that up, that's what we're looking at right now. So I'd love to be able to come back to you and talk to you guys about that. As you know, with sort of any wildly important goal, you set these sub-important goals, and they're all steps that can get you there. So I'll use the example again of the House 1000. Everyone's they're seeing a dashboard that's saying, gosh, you only have 30 or 40 or 200 people in, you're nowhere near 1,000. But they knew that the steps that they were taking were going to be able to open up 1,000 by the end of the year. We're going to have some similar kind of cadences with the way these these elements sort of unroll because of the nature of how you implement them, how we stack them. But love to come back to you with that. And then, yeah, we'll send you guys the policies and we'll include all of that in here. Like I said, by early April, and absolutely get you guys the language of it.
Thanks. Brent asked about a long wanted facility type. Brent?
Yeah. And hi, Amy. So before I took this job with Project 529, I worked for Councilman Kashmann's office for 8 years. And I asked every single new director, what were their views on speed tables? And I watched it go from a hard no, the snow plows can't go over it, even though they have floats, fire trucks can't, and so all that kind of stuff that we know turned out not to be true over the years. And
well, it's hard to do that when you've got boulders sitting up the road, putting in speed tables and others, and they have plows and snow just like we do. So
exactly, exactly. And that's exactly right, Amy. And Nick, if you mention this to Nick Williams, he'll just die of laughter because I would hammer him on this all the time. And so again, Councilman Kashmann would let me off my leash to do that. So but yeah, I just wanted to hear your views on it. I know that the city has pilots in place, but it's just in line with what you're talking about. And I've been keeping up with you. I think you're doing a great job. And I think your focus on safety is excellent. I also think you're down to earth, and I like that too. So, but just if you could just kind of let us know what you're thinking and maybe help you with your 50% reduction goal. So.
Absolutely. And, so as we go into this on the speed table side and others, so obviously speed tables have some solutions for us, especially on our, our more local and neighborhood streets options as we start thinking about it. And then even as we go into our collectors and arterials, their considerations. I mean, you heard me use the example of temporary speed bumps on Federal. I didn't say Federal, but maybe I'm going to look at Federal as an example. And just by the way, one quick note, when I comment about rumble strips, I know rumble strips are tricky for bicyclists, and we're talking about like the transverse kind. Interestingly, my husband, who's an avid bicyclist, is advocating for putting rumble strips into the into the striping that separates a bike lane from a regular lane. And there are some examples of that happening. So he's been pitching me too on ideas. So I'd love you guys' thoughts about that later. But short answer is yes, it's on the table. Obviously, the construction is more infrastructure heavy installation. And so what I'd love to be able to talk with you guys about, especially as we talk about what we are building in 24, and that's going to be part of this broader media thing that I wanted to talk about, that I was telling you guys about for April. It's sort of combination speed. And here's what is happening in 24. This is what DME is delivering. But what I don't have a total handle yet on, Brent, is where we're actually thinking about programming some of them. And you guys might even know better. I don't have all of that on the map yet, quite in my head. But the short answer is yes. And the short answer is I do think that we should be including them. And I do believe they will be part of some of these solutions as we think about these high energy network corridors. And like I said, whether it is a speed table, speed bump, transverse rumble strips, but the effect of it and what it accomplishes and how we sort of minimize really speed, and especially as we come into vulnerable areas like intersections and others.
Great. And just a quick suggestion, I think a great pilot would be between Colorado Boulevard and University down Florida, right by Corey Merrill. We have 3 schools over there, and DOTI did put in a bike lane and has done a lot of speed reduction. But I actually had a planner from Portland who explained to me that it's definitely possible to do it and did a drawing for me. I just don't have access to my city email anymore to pull it up.
So Colorado Boulevard between where?
University and Colorado Boulevard, and pretty much where the schools are over there, Steele and Steele and Florida.
On which street then? So
Florida.
Between Colorado and University.
I'm sorry,
street?
Florida.
Florida. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, and so Florida and Steele is right where Corey Elementary is. But yeah, okay. I thought I'd toss it out. As I presented that to Councilman Kashmann, and I presented that to Ulyss Cleckley, and he thought it was a good idea, but then he was gone. So
yeah. All right. Well, let me look into that. Between combination of speed tables, our neighborhood roundabouts, how we're sort of working in with our neighborhood bikeway, some of those things. I think those are all parts of the consideration, because they do have one goal and objective: slow speed, increase awareness, and such. So
great.
Yeah. Other
we
thoughts
had-
and questions that are coming through.
y-
And Joel,
yeah,
you didn't think I'd take the whole 45 minutes, and here
of
we
course, of course. No, I didn't know it would be so freeform. This is delightful.
are.
The right turn on red was included in DOTI's revision to, actually it was called for in earlier things, including INC's platform, but it made it into the short list of the Vision Zero action plan and immediately got a little bit of hesitation noises from some council members. Do you know where we're going on this? Allison was asking, do you have a position on this?
Yes, actually, let me pull up another piece as we sit and we talk about that. So right turn on red is actually a really good and fair question. And in fact, we were just talking about with council, and I'm trying to find my presentation because I actually asked the team to put together a little bit of data and insights and information for me as we continue to talk about no right turn on red. And so hold on, I'm gonna see if I can find it here because it has some interesting thoughts. And the upshot, if I can't find it, I'll just sort of reveal. Our biggest fatality is not from right turn on red. It is left turn.
100.
Yep, left turns. Now, that said, it all matters. And so what I'm asking the team to do and what I've asked the team to look at right now is how we actually take a look at this and how we think strategically about what we're doing with, as I mentioned to you, policies on how we think about people first and how we approach all of this. So yes, I do know that we have some council members who would be wildly opposed to a right turn ban. I also think there are certainly areas throughout the city where there's value in thinking about where we do that, city core and others. And Allison, feel free to jump in as we get into this.
You're right.
I actually found the presentation, so hold on, let me pull it up. So this was actually something that I just showed and shared with Councilwoman Lewis's team because they were asking about the same thing. So here's the part of the analysis on where we are right now. And I want to show this because I think it's really important for us as we think about approach, policy, driver behavior, interactions that we have on the street and others, about how we think about what we do. So this is, I think you guys are all familiar with these things. When I say fatal, and SBI means serious bodily injury. And so wanted to give you a sense of sort of where things are and where things are happening in the city. And this is over the last 2 years. So we could just sort of give you a sense of where that is. So right turns on red, right turns on signals, left turns on signals. You see the greater than here because when they put together this data, they were doing a real quick run for me. And so they didn't have time to get all of it. So it's significantly high. So they just sort of said, hey, it's well over. So just so you see why that number is that way. And as we go through this is a little bit hard. I got actually a better map on this and trying to show the sort of where the right turn on red sort of serious bodily injury crashes were in whether it was bicycle or pedestrian through the city. So as we think about this and as we consider sort of where we go, a couple of things that I want to do, and one of the things that I'd like to be able to do is to take during our fatality reduction program and think about how we run a pilot, particularly on a corridor, and something that Councilwoman Lewis, they would ask us to think about as well, along a corridor so that we could think about what the impact is during a pilot and how we would look at that. Simultaneous to that, I think one of the things, and you're seeing something, this team will kill me if I show you guys this. So I mentioned to you that I think about things like code. So part of how I wanted to think about that people first, and John, you asked, like, how would I actually ensure that we do things that we say? This is me just writing and talking, and how we would look at how we replace. Now, let me talk about something like this. This is not anything, you guys, that I'm doing yet, and I wanted to give you a sense of my level of thinking and what we're looking at. It's right and left turns. How we think about who has the right of way in our crosswalks. Right now we talk about yield, and I'd love your thoughts. In fact, June, you probably have some great thoughts on this. Allison too, you guys could pick this apart for me and help me think differently about it. How do we think and change our municipal code in a way that ensures that people have the right of way in that area? How do we articulate that and what that looks like? So how do I think differently? Not just, and the problem with the right turn on red ban is that it implies it's only at a signalized intersection, and that it's not where we are also seeing our problems and our challenges. So how do we think differently about this? So you see actually two, both in crosswalks, both in signalized intersections and our others. And if people are there, you do not turn. I would sort of had this like catchy little thing in my mind. It was, you know, people in sight, no turn on right. People in sight, no right turn or left. And so how do we articulate that? And what does that look like? So that's some of the kind of thinking that I want to be, and that I'm pressing and asking the team about. And so when you ask about no right turn on red, I'm absolutely thinking and how we want to approach it. And I want to do it also in a way that maybe pilots it, that thinks about where we are with our data, and then it maybe also wraps around it some continued things that think differently about how we think about people in our right of way and where they're accessed. And I love your reactions or thoughts even to that. So
I'm a crossing guard at 19th and Lincoln at downtown Denver Expeditionary School. 200% of my job is people turning right on red. I've had people roll down their windows and scream at me, "I can turn right on red." To which I scream back, "Not when there are pedestrians in the crosswalk."
Right.
But isn't that already sorry, my cat, isn't that already a state law?
The municipal code is that they need to yield to them in the crosswalk, right? So that's
Right.
the way it is a yield. And that language, I think, gets lost and watered down. And if you were talking about your right turn on red, are you talking about at a signalized intersection?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and so it's a combination of things, right? You know, so if
and I have an LPI, plus
so absolutely
some old
that is
lady in a big yellow jacket with a
it's an
stop
enforceable, should be a ticketed enforcement kind of action. And Jill and Locantore and I have had this long conversation about exactly this is, you know, the reality is also enforcement. And so when we talk about things like automated speed cameras and some others, we know that there's a lot that those can see. And so how do we add other behaviors in? And so something that we can think about. But yeah, you're totally right.
Jill's my next door neighbor. She's literally on the other side of this.
Oh, good. Not Locantore.
Hi, Jill. So we were talking about the vulnerable road user, the statewide bill, and adding the red light, the right on red information into it, and like what the politics of was. Maybe we drop the right on red to make sure the vulnerable road users information goes into it.
Yeah. And you know, when Jill and I had this conversation, we were going on a walk around City Park, and she said, "Amy, I fear that when we talk about it this way, if you do it this way, that like." And I said, I fear that right turn on red is too small ban, right? Because of where I know and what our data. And so how do we think bigger? It's not just signalized intersections, about crosswalks. And so trying to think about how we solve for that and the behavior back and forth. And we could probably have a whole session on this as we go, but that's where I want to think and where we want to go.
So do you think the city will take a position? I'm sorry, Joel, one more second. Do you think the city will take a position on this, on the statute, the bill at the General Assembly?
So June and I chatted about this. So yes, I would like to testify with that. And so I worked with our team and others, and know when the city does this, that that sometimes we're thoughtful about how we testify on things and positions and such. But I would like to very much at least be present to testify, to talk about. And June, you saw my follow up on that in regards to the impacts of something like that could have, what the safety situation is in Denver, and how something like that would be of benefit, if you will, to how we would address some of the real problems that we have. And, you know, that speaks to me then again about things like money. And as you know, we're going through some of that right now in our budget challenges and our budget cuts and where we go. And so that it will take some time and money to also get to address these. And frankly, some of the goals that I have right now with the fatality piece is what can I do that's quick and cheap and effective, and how we can move it forward quickly. So policies and things like this are some parts of that. And Lucia, you asked a question in VRU. That stands for vulnerable road user. Oh, people answered in the chat. I didn't scan down. Basically meaning a pedestrian, a cyclist. I include people who roll, i.e. scooter riders, anyone out of the car.
Okay. We are over time, but I feel compelled to just get a couple of these really good questions. People are upvoting in. One was a topic that was recently.
I'm okay to stay around. So
okay, I appreciate that. One was a topic that was recently at City Council about bus stops. James, do you want to ask your question? James, are you here?
Might have had to go, but let me just talk about
Yeah.
that. And
Yeah. Can the
we
city
gotta-
take responsibility? Can work better in partnership? Can we do this right? Yeah.
Yeah, and actually, so we, as you may have seen in the city council briefing, so our team, along with RTD and others, presented on our bus stop program and sort of where we are. And you guys know that there's a combination of ways that bus stops happen. There are thousands of them through the city. Only a portion of them are really they have amenities, and they're a really substantive bus stop and allows, protective and from the elements and a variety of things. And it's a combination of sponsorship kind of programs that put bus stops in, and then equally take bus stops out when when they are or the amenities when they're not so desired anymore. And so it is a possibility that we could and look and assume, sort of responsibility in that. Now, doing that, as you can imagine, puts an incredible amount of liability and maintenance and upkeep and how we'd actually build the infrastructure and all of that. And of course, it's money and programming that we do not have. And so it is something that we have a priority for. We are looking into how we continue to expand the program. We are thinking about more innovative partnerships that maybe could deliver on some of that in collaboration with advertising and others, and working with RTD to do so. So not a perfect answer right now, but I will say this, when we talk about things where the city has decided that something is so important that they want DOTI to be able to think about how we own it and manage it and take care of that from a transportation perspective. And sidewalks is a good example of that. And so, we're excited, back to my last thoughts, when I talked about our goals and I had all these S's, and you don't know all the S's, but it is safety, sidewalks, our streets in regards to our bike lanes and what we're doing and the ongoing maintenance of these assets that we have, our bridges and otherwise, snow, as you experienced today, and then services from our trash to our stormwater. And then the last piece is underpinned by dollar signs. So dealing with our budget cuts, how we think strategically about preparation as we have upcoming things like bond issues and stuff, which will possibly happen, and then revenue. How do we think about creating revenue streams and others that allow us to be able to maintain and manage this transportation system that we think is so critically important, and a lot of attention to that. So that's the rest of my goals in 5 seconds. So.
The last question, and I do want to be sure we mention this for people who haven't seen the news. Denver was just awarded 2 Reconnecting Communities grants, or 2 have been awarded that occur in Denver. Let me say the applicants are
not quite fully public yet, Joel. So you're like,
oh, it's public. It's published.
Yes. It's our senators and others asked us to hold sort of how we were going to do all the celebrations that way.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. All right. Well, we will again celebrate, but I have the PDF in front of me from the US DOT. So congratulations on that. We do have somebody on the call, Leslie, who's very familiar with federal grants and things and has a question along those lines.
Yeah, Leslie.
Yeah. Hi. So I work full-time as a proposal writer. I do a lot of work in terms of Bill IRA funding. I was just curious, what funds DOTI was pursuing in terms of the windfall from Bill IRA. And then just as far as that goes, if you're looking to supplement more infrastructure, if you're looking to supplement more service, so like, for example, headways, bus related stuff, just kind of what you guys are going for and like why you're going for it.
Yeah. Absolutely. Great question. So a couple things. So we have an entire team dedicated actually to how we secure and look at tapping the funds that are available through Bill, as well as, and just for everyone's reference, the bipartisan infrastructure law. Some people also call it IIJA. And then IRA is the Inflation Reduction Act, and that came with a lot of dollars in regards to sort of infrastructure, electrification, decarbonization, and others sort of in that space. So short answer in the transportation side, because there's obviously a lot from a city perspective in regards to energy and decarbonization and fleet and others. But short answer, so we have several that we have in front that we've been pursuing. So reconnecting communities, we are very excited, obviously, about this win. It is about reconnecting really Globeville, Swansea, Elyria, and how we sort of tie together from a stock show to Globeville and Elyria with the Petty Cram Bridge, how we look at cleanup in regards to a Brownsfield cleanup, as well as additionally another bridge. And we had layered on an additional request on what's called a RAISE grant on top of that. But since we won the full Reconnecting Communities, which we were thrilled about, that's $35 million award. It's extraordinary, allows us to do the entire thing. We also have prioritization on a number of different other grant programs, and the one that is particularly near right now is what's called Safe Streets for All, SS4A. And this safety revolution that I talked to you about is something that when we talked with the assistant secretary the other week, he told us that there's preferences for systems thinking, and we think that we're aligned with that. We're actually going after 2 pilot programs and quick implementation projects, and many that roll up into this goal of our fatalities objectives, and then the big shebang, all of it. And so, upwards, we have a $30 million request on how we think about our 35 high priority injury networks in the vein of our safety revolution. So that's an example of programs that we're going for. There are a number of different other service oriented ones that we've been thinking about. One of our priorities this year, as you know, is to extend our transit services and our programs. Specifically, we have our micro transit services, the connector services that are in the Montbello and Green Valley, and actually a little bit into the Gloveville communities. And we plan to expand that into the West Denver area here this year. So that is one of our other goals. And some of that is grant funded, and we're continuing to look at that. And also some core capacity grants, actually. I mean, I'm rattling them all off, Leslie. FTA has some core capacity grants about how we think about integrated downtown Denver and downtown mobility services and others. So we could talk about a few more, but that's, and frankly, we were so successful in our previous, because as you know, a lot of these require federal match. They require dollars that we commit to that. So we were using our bond projects as ways of going and completing those bond projects when costs were going up and such. And that wasn't the greatest storytelling. And to win these grants, they're ultra competitive. They're oversubscribed, especially on the discretionary grants. And we're working better at getting to tell our story. And that's, I think, what led to the success that we had with reconnecting communities.
Well, thank you. And good luck on the applications.
Thank you very much. If you have any great insights on SS4A, we would sure take them.
Well, this has been an extraordinary evening with you. You've started your tenure with a bang, and I think if people ask us, what did you hear? You met with a new DOTI director. What'd you hear? I think we're all going to say safety revolution that's coming, and that's the news of the night. The safety revolution is coming, and how you're going to be working with the mayor and his demonstrated ability to use the moral urgency of these topics and pivot that from the topics he's been publicly facing on to the safety revolution on our streets. It's fantastic.
Joel, I think I'll steal what you just said and reuse it again with the mayor as well. So no, that's lovely.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, and we'll talk about how to stay closer in touch.
Thank you, guys, and I'd love to come back. So let's keep the conversation going.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.